Hello! Welcome to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours, where we spend time well by spending it together. I'm Claire Martin.
Hello.
Hey.
We've arrived. It's the end. It's number 9.
We did it, you guys. We almost did it.
Last but not least.
Number 9.
Yes, let's
and
make
for
sure
number
we
9,
keep
we're
up with
just
that.
going to each list one character and then leave.
And we're all going to
Jeremy-
agree with each other.
No, that hardly ever happens. No, Jeremy
Bad
has a character that he thinks is going to rile me up, and I don't know if I'm more curious to know what he thinks would make me mad than I am in actually getting mad.
Oh, I know it will make you mad. I know it will be worse than anything that's happened so far in terms of your 8-ness showing itself. I'm 100% confident in that. So I just want to invite you into your 9-wing before we get started today.
I don't have a 9-wing. I have a 7-wing.
She doesn't.
Well, I'm going to need you to develop one. They say in the second half of
like
life,
that.
you
I don't
develop
think
your other
that's
wing.
how that works.
So I'm going to need you to start.
I can't.
Whatever
be a
number
9
I have,
when I
I'm
haven't had
like
any
reaching in
coffee
both
yet.
directions because I'm an old man. But we're gonna. I'm a little anxious actually. I have the 9's anxiety today about sharing this very name. So, and I don't think I'm necessarily right. I just think I'm different. That's the difference between 8 and everyone else. It's the difference between
Yeah.
your 8 and my
Maybe
4.
Just you saying that drives me crazy. Are you a 4 now? Is that what you've landed on?
I mean, I think at the end of this process, I am still down to 3 numbers, and I would put them in rank order. Are you ready for them? Or is that
No.
for a separate? That's for a separate episode.
I
Where we
think
just break
that's for a
down
separate
me.
episode that you and Kelly can have together, and I will
Okay.
just watch from a distance.
She can't handle
while
it.
eating
She's like,
pork.
Just
no.
get
Yeah,
a drink,
I don't
right?
think
You're
I can
sitting
do
in the
that.
back over there, like wanting to speak but not allowing yourself to speak, and we will decide on that day between 3, 4, and 8. We'll decide
Super.
on that day. That's
But
not the
today,
order
we're
they're
not
in, by the
talking
way.
about
I think
any
it's
of those numbers
I think
because
it's
we're
4.
talking about
I
nines.
think it's 4, 3, 8 is the rank that I would put them in terms of like
Nobody
likelihoods.
asked.
Say what? What?
I said nobody asked. I mean, I'm glad. I guess I'm glad you know the ranking, but
I don't know
to
if.
me the ranking
Why do
makes
you
it more
think I'm doing
confusing
this?
because it's a bunch of numbers. Like it's like my number 1 is a 3, my number 2 is a 4. Like it doesn't.
Well, I know I
that
have
just- to
1,
me, that
but
makes
I'm
my
like
brain
trying to
tired.
figure it out. You know what I mean? I have 1. I'm settled. Like I just don't know what it is. It's one of those, I think.
When I started talking to you, Jeremy, about Enneagram, we had 5 that we were trying to work on. So I'm proud of you.
Yeah, we're down. We've and by the end of this episode, maybe we'll be further.
Maybe. No, we can't add any more back in, though. Like, don't add
I
it back
won't
in.
add any more back in. I'm fairly confident in this.
So
You guys
we
wanna
should
talk about
probably tell our listeners what a 9 is because that's actually what we're here to talk about.
Okay, you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so if you're looking at the Enneagram diagram, there's, it's this kind of crazy 9-pointed star, and the 9 number actually sits at the very top of the star. This has a ton of significance, but for now, just understand that the 9s have a really great perspective on humanity, on the world. They're kind of known for seeing like all the angles, So they're called the Peacemaker or the Reconciler, also the Optimist, Utopian, right? They're in the very center of the body triad, so they share that with 8 on one side and 1 on the other. So 8, 9, and 1 are all in the body center. They're an anchor point. So they're 3, 6, and 9. They sit on that central triangle. And what that means is that because they're in the very middle of the triad, though the emotion that they have the easiest access to, theoretically, in that triad is anger, 9s actually suppress their anger or feel a bit disconnected from it. So 8s externalize their anger. 1s internalize and kind of turn it against themselves, and 9s kind of bottle it up, ignore it, and suppress it. So they're also body repressed. Okay, so remember, because they're in the center of their own intelligence center, it actually disconnects them from it. So they are going to be also kind of past oriented, living in the past. They share the withdrawn stance with the 5 and the 4. So they're going to deal with getting their needs met by moving away from people, because people have all sorts of differing opinions, and 9s have a hard time figuring out where they land, right? They're very concerned with keeping the calm, keeping the peace, right? So it's less about making sure other people agree and just making sure that they are protected from like rocky seas. You know what I mean? Like anything that upsets their inner calm is really scary, and they'll just shut down and disappear, right? So they can be a bit inert. So I am pretty sure my son is going to probably end up being a 9. Don't type your children, but I'm going to just say that because I have a great example. He kind of, if he's moving, but if he stops, it's really hard to get him going again. You know what I mean? He's off in his own land. We call it Reese land. Like, he kind of just rocks his world to his own tune. He doesn't care about what other people think. He's not really paying attention. He can focus. He chooses not to. Doesn't really matter to him. He can be super stubborn. That's actually one way that their anger sort of manifests, is being stubborn. They are concerned with, their core motivation is peace of mind and feeling whole. Their fear, the basic fear of the 9, is of loss or being separated or fragmented from the whole. Okay, so that has a lot to do with their feeling and concern around, making sure that everything's okay and calm and like going well. The fixation for the 9 is actually indolence. So they can just kind of get stuck, right? It's like, and so you'll notice too, when other numbers kind of pull into a 9 energy, sometimes it can be good because it can bring like peace, but oftentimes it can bring like paralysis because it's just like,
interesting.
I'd rather just go take a nap, right? Like, I just want to deal with it. It'll be fine when I wake up, right? The passion or the emotional struggle for the 9 is sloth. Doesn't mean lazy. It kind of means like lethargy. It's a bit of self-forgetting. So they don't understand themselves. So they can merge with any other type. They're kind of known for that, right? So the 9 is the person, if you're in a group or you're asking them one-on-one, hey, where do you want to eat for dinner? That is like the worst thing you could ever ask, because they don't want to make the decision. They're scared that if they make the decision on some really deep level, this isn't like conscious, right? Like on some level, they're worried that if they say something that is not agreeable to the group, that it'll actually jeopardize their position or their standing. God. Yeah. So here's the thing. So 9s also feel like maybe the lost message growing up is your voice doesn't matter, right? Your voice is not important. Yeah. So now that I'm feeling like I'm seeing some of these tendencies in one of my children, anytime he speaks up, I like shut everybody up. I'm like, Reese, your voice matters. What do you want to say? Yeah. And I have adult friends who identify as 9s. And I know that like if I see one friend in particular kind of voice a dissenting opinion in a text thread or on a Facebook comment thread, it is powerful, and I try to reaffirm that in her because I know how difficult that was for her to have done in the first place, right? So Claire, you probably don't have experience with that personally. Like you could probably, as an 8, you can say it and move on. But for a 9 to express really strong opinions about anything is a big, big, big deal, and probably hopefully movements towards growth for them.
So
when they're
do 9s just like apologize and like provide context for everything they say all the time?
I probably. I feel like that sounds. Yeah.
That would be a 9 with like anxiety issues, right?
I don't think that like 9s would say a lot that would require apologizing.
No, it's not apologizing, but like almost like being sorry for speaking up. Do you know what I mean?
Possibly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's hard to get them to the point where they speak up in the first place. Is more where I'm coming from. However, that anger that gets bottled up eventually has to go somewhere. So 9s actually do this really surprising thing when they kind of blow their fuse or they actually like explode, and it is really alarming. So like if you've ever known someone that is just like the chillest person, right? And then all of a sudden they punch their hand through a wall because they're angry about something and you're like, WTF just happened? Could be a 9 because it becomes so much for them to just swallow down, that eventually it does erupt. Once it's out, it's gone. They can move on and their peace is restored, but it does happen. So sometimes that's kind of like something to look out for 9s. When they're healthy, they're patient, they're strong, they have really great endurance. They're steady, they have grit and stamina. They have an inner stability. So they're really good in crisis, Also, again, they make like great therapists because they can see everyone's perspective. Again, because they have this kind of vantage point. It just, they can, I wouldn't call it objectivity, just that we were talking about empaths yesterday, right? Like that I could see, and Jeremy mentioned, the 9 probably on some kind of level can at least get what other people are going through. In a group, they do tend to forget who they are or not know who they are in the first place. So they do tend to kind of merge with the group, right? So whatever works, right? Or in a relationship with a 9, if they merge with you, all of a sudden you've got somebody who now all of your favorite things are their favorite things. Or in case of asking for restaurants on my son's birthday, we're like, where do you want to eat? And he goes, I want to eat pho. Everybody in the family likes pho. I'm like, but what do you want to eat? Do you like pho? And he does probably, but it was more to him about what will keep everyone else happy because that makes him happy. So when they start to become unhealthy, they can retreat into their inner sanctum. They can become paralyzed, apathetic, disengaged, complacent, really appeasing, kind of repressed, neglectful, and they can like literally disappear. So you want to be on the lookout for those things. The wings on either side, the 9 with an 8 wing is called the referee. So they can combine agreeability with endurance and strength, and they're really good at mediating conflicts. Again, they're pulling into that power of the 8. And then the 9 with a 1 wing is called the dreamer. So these folks are imaginative. They have so many different points of view, and they can use that to create this ideal world. So again, idealistic, purposeful.
Okay.
Stress and security, we've got 3 and 6 for the 2 movements. So if you are a 9 who gets to a point where their type is not working for them, they've kind of run out of tools, they can move to 6 in stress. 6 is the loyalist. So a good move, an intentional move that can help you in stress will introduce action to be able to make decisions. You can plan because you're moving down into the head space, so you can implement some planning, be responsive, outspoken, and dutiful. If you do that move in an unintentional way and land in the low side of 6, that can look like being more anxious. So there might be some of that, Jeremy. Passive aggressive, lazy, can kind of start in with the conspiracy theories, and then also play the victim card a lot. So in health, when doing really well and you can move to your heart point or your growth point, you can tap into the 3, which is the achiever. So at their growth point, 9s can recognize their worth and value themselves and then put themselves out there a bit more. So be a little more less sort of not risk averse, but like conflict averse, right? And be willing to kind of step out and move out of their bubble.
Okay,
Question.
Before we get there, can we talk about the subtypes for a second?
Sure. So we have 3 different subtypes with every type. So it's not just 9 types, it's 27. There's all kinds of more variants, but subtypes here. We have the self-pres subtype of the 9, which is called appetite. So they're all about comfort. So these are going to be the folks that you will often find kind of vegged out, Netflix, pizza, and totally happy with that, right? And they essentially can merge with their own needs, right? The social subtype is called participation. This is the counter type. So this actually does look a bit different than a traditional 9, like based on, the archetype kind of descriptions and stuff. They can merge with the group. So whatever their group, so again, social subtypes are more concerned with community, kind of their, social belonging. These folks actually can look more like a 3 or a 2. So the achiever or the helper. And then we've got the sexual or intimate subtype. These folks are called fusion, and they're going to be the ones that are kind of merging with one specific person. They can often be really codependent. So,
okay.
And again, you can have there's a stack. You have a primary subtype, a secondary subtype, and then you have one that you're disconnected from, that you've repressed. So, however that looks like, what your primary one might look like, your instinct, secondary, and then one that you don't identify with at all. So
that's awesome, Kelly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeremy, what you got?
Jeremy's a 9 now.
I have questions about what anger really looks like when a 9, what that looks like. It's you said eruption, which I understand, but like on an average day, what does an angry 9 look like?
It's not on an average. It's punctuated like moments. I don't see that being a sort of readily available expression for a 9. They do actually, their anger can help them act. So they actually do call it right action for the 9s. So it can push them into movement. So that can be positive ways of expressing anger as well as like negative, not amazing ways, right? But for the most part, it takes a really long time for that to kind of build up. So I wouldn't say that exists on a daily basis. I would say that is very hopefully few and far between, especially if it's coming out in a negative way.
All right. I'm good. I learned some stuff.
Cool.
So I have a list. Some of the names I've said before. So it'll get me into trouble, I imagine. But if 9s merge with other numbers, maybe that's why they would appear twice. Do you know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So here is I'll start my list and you all can shout at me as we go.
Kelly won't shout at you.
Okay. Well, in case it happens, everyone's been warned. Helena and All's Well That Ends Well could be a 9. Could be a 9.
I was wondering that too.
She does do the peacemaking thing, and when Bertram treats her like garbage, it's not like she's okay with it, but she does take a peacemaking approach to that problem.
Yeah.
And I know the action of her character early in that play is a helper, literally. I mean, she's helping the King of France get over an abscess or something. But and
I talked about how I think the play wants her to be a 6, but I don't know if she really is.
Yeah. So I think she's just a great character who
she is.
Who it is solving problems, but I know there's another type that's the problem solver. But this is more like she just has a presence that's sort of even keeled. And anyway, so I have the clown in Antony and Cleopatra, who strikes me as a different kind of clown than many other clowns in other plays, and it's just really deferential. And it's a clown that comes in at when that play is bending sharply towards the serious, and it's a lot of fun, but it's a very different kind of clown than other things. I also wonder about Octavia in that play. We had trouble typing her elsewhere, but also there's not really a great character there. No. LeBeau in As You Like It, who seems conflict averse and is trying to run some interference for others. Corin maybe also, who doesn't commit, he doesn't seem to care exactly. He does, but it's about sort of his stuff. And actually, I think there are 2 other characters in As You Like It, Martext and William, who could both be 9s because they're just like, oh, yeah, okay, great, whatever. They get talked into anything.
Yeah, and I don't know if that because I thought about Martext and William. I don't know if that's the character so much as that's what Will needed them to do in the play to get the plot moving.
And I don't know how much of a character there is. I mean, I think the actors have a lot to do with that, right? Yeah, the actor could certainly play that any number of ways and probably work. So I think Horatio could be a 9. There are other places where I think he fits. So here's one that I'm really confident in, but it's a play that's near and dear to your heart. So I'm just going to say out loud, John of Gaunt is a 9, but not historically. In that play,
no,
Richard
not
II,
historically.
I think he's a broker. Like literally, he's making peace, and between his hothead son and the king, and
then when he's dying and he like lashes out at Richard, it's like this anger we haven't seen from him before. It's like bottled up anger that he's holding in, and it's because he's dying that it like comes out. I can see that. The real one was not. I would like to be clear. The real John of Gaunt was not.
But interestingly, like he kind of has two identities. The historical John of Gaunt, where like in England, he's sort of passive is the wrong word, but he's sort of willing to stand back and like let things happen and play the kingmaker. But on the continent, he's making war and doing all kinds of other things and trying to take over Spain. And so anyway, so I think Cinna the poet in Julius Caesar is a 9 who gets torn to bits. And that's
metaphorically,
metaphorically and literally probably. So we've talked about this character before, also from Julius Caesar. And we can come back to talk about Brutus, but I think Brutus might be a 9. I think there are some other things going on too. Like there's maybe a 2 there, and there's maybe a 5 there. I don't know, but like I feel like I've seen Brutus played as a 9, and there's a lot of stuff in the text about it takes him a long time to sort of get convinced, and then he really is like, you can argue that he's going along with the group, not exactly making his own choices. And that speech, his speech before Mark Antony's speech, is basically entirely about merging, you could argue. It's like invisibility of the person in favor of the cause of the moment, you know. So
and also of blending his identity with the identity of the people he's talking to, because it's the first time in the play he speaks in prose. He's speaking to the common people and he speaks in prose.
Yeah.
Hello. Are you a Patreon subscriber? If so, then this message is for you. Thank you so much for supporting Sweet Tea Shakespeare. As we gear up for another exciting season of shows, concerts, and events, we are issuing a challenge to boost our monthly Patreon sustainer giving. If you can up your pledge, even just a little bit, you will ensure that Sweet Tea Shakespeare can continue making delightful content all year round. You can also buy a season ticket that will grant you access to all of our Patreon content, along with reserved seats to every one of our performances. For more information, check out our website at sweetteashakespeare.com or find us on Patreon at patreon.com/sweetteashakes.
Yep.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because we had Brutus and Helena as question mark 6s, and so this is the second time now that we've come up to like a major character, and we've been like, were we wrong about the 6, or they may be a 9? So Kellie, 6s and 9s, how do we differentiate there?
So they share an arrow, so often that can confuse. Let's see. 6s may enjoy nature, to space out and relax, and 9s may be insightful and internally tense. So those are kind of some ways in which they may appear similar. The first question is tension or relaxation. So are you finely tuned and tightly wired, or are you relaxed and easygoing? Right. So those are two very different sort of manifestations of tension. 9s are not tense, right? They just detach from whatever it is that stresses them out. Wariness or openness. So when you meet new people, do you tend to be more watchful or wary, deciding whether or not you can trust them, or are you quite open and not cautious around new people? So that's 6 first, 9 second.
So that makes me think Helena is a 6 and Brutus is hard to tell, because I would split those answers on Brutus.
I was going to go the other way. I was going to say Helena is definitely a 9, and Brutus, based on those questions, sounds more like a 6.
Okay.
So intense or optimistic is the other one. So 6s are quite intense, even though they may not think of themselves in this way. And then 9s are just relaxed, calm, optimistic, and see more positive than negative.
Okay.
They also are in, so they're in different conflict sort of groupings. So remember, we've talked about that before. The 6 is in the reactive group when they deal with conflict, and then the 9 is in the positive outlook group. So they share that with 2 and 7.
Yeah, I would say.
So when faced with conflict, that could be telling.
I think I agree with you now that I'm computing it all and slightly more caffeinated. Yeah, Brutus would land as a 6, and Helena as a 9. Yeah.
Because she has that scene with the Widow and Diana pretty late in the play when they're traveling back to France, and the Widow and Diana are like, this plan, like, who knows if it even worked or if the king's going to believe us. We're tired. We've been traveling on foot since Italy. And she has this little mini monologue where she's like, come on, you guys, like, we can do it. We just have to get there. I promise it will work out. And then I will, like, give you the riches. And, like, you know, you have my gratitude now. Soon you'll have the king's gratitude too. And, like, she just is she's able to be a cheerleader even that late in the play when it seems like everything is going to be a disaster and, like, turn out poorly, right? She still has this optimistic outlook. Whereas Brutus, I think Brutus slots more neatly into the 6 box. Okay, who else do you have?
The one that's going to get me into a lot of trouble, and I'm happy to be wrong, but I think an argument. I'm just going to be wrong. I'm just going to say it out loud. Are you ready? Get ready, Princess of France. I'm going to move right along.
You can't just drop it and run away, Jeremy.
No,
he's like, and so over.
No, done.
Okay, I'm just saying, I could make an argument. I would make an argument.
Fine.
And it's a little bit like with her, it would be structural, right? Because those dudes are a mess, a total mess. They're an absolute it's a storm of mess, and she is there as the relatively mature adult. Calm, even-keeled, comparatively so. And she has a mature response, I think, to the bad news at the end of that play. Yeah, so that's my argument. There you go.
All of my cells in my body just want to be, like, screaming right now. But I hear you, and I do.
You're the body language. I love that.
Yeah, I do. I do see where you're coming from. In fact, what I was sort of thinking when you first said you had one that was making me angry, I was like, okay, if he retcons Hal or Rosalind, I'll actually attack him. I know we're through screens, but I'll jump through the screen. And then the other one is I was like, he knows how I feel about LOL, so maybe this is about the princess. But I will. What you're saying totally makes sense to me in the sense of comparison, right? Like, if you line up these 8 courtiers who are all, I would argue that a good production of this play, there should not be more than 200 years of life between these 8 characters. I think they're all under 25, and if you play them as older than that, you're sort of missing the point. These are young people. These are like university age kids who are still developing their frontal lobes, right? And if you look at that set of characters, especially considering what train wrecks the poor boys are, I think she absolutely comes across as a wiser and more mature and more a character with much more perspective, let's say, right? And 9s are all about that perspective. And I definitely see that with her. I just think it's such a low bar because what she's being compared to is so disastrous. And I think it's a bit like we were talking about with 6s, where it's like, is this who the character authentically is, or is this what the circumstances of the play are making us kind of recognize in them, is like these behaviors? Because I see that beginning moment with Boyette when he's being Boyette. So he's like, think about why you're here. Think about why the king sent you, his pretty eligible young daughter, to meet this really handsome young king. Like, think about it. Know what the secret politicking thing is. And she's like, I have a job to do. I'm here at the, behest of my father, the king, on a diplomatic mission. He's trusted me, a young woman. Like, I have to prove to him that I can take over the country. Like, I have a job and I'm going to do it well. And you can stop flattering me because that's pretty useless. And that's like that's our sort of introduction to her. And it's not, to me, that isn't a peacemaking instinct. That is like an achiever instinct. That is in her. She's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to make my dad proud of me. And I think in order to live up to that goal that she has set for herself, that she is going to be just as good, if not better, than any of the male messengers that her dad could have sent, she is going to be the mature and like sort of graceful and conscientious voice.
And that sounds to me like a 9 moving to a 3. Checkmate.
Oh, I don't.
No, I'm kidding. I think you're right.
I mean,
but I
also
think
that 9s and 3s are connected.
I don't know that I mean, I just think it's for me, it goes back to the structural thing, which is like, and this is me admitting my sort of bias about that play. I do love that play, but I think it's I have trouble seeing actual people in it. Do you know what I mean? I know this is where we disagree, and I don't mean that as like it's poorly written. I don't mean any of that, but like it's like an impressionistic piece to me, where it's about this immaturity versus this maturity, and this unstable thing versus this stable thing, and it is about like language, and we're talking all day tomorrow about Love's Labor's Lost, so I'm sort of into it, but like that's what it is for me. It's like this sort of like beautiful idea quilt, whatever you want to, and so it's actually less about the specific humanity in that regard, and it's just a different way of reading it. But I think the 3 is there, and I mean, part of the reason that play is upsetting is that nobody gets what they want at the end. Nobody achieves what they want at the end, you know. So
that's true, and then of course, if you think about it, what sort of draws me into her, one of the many reasons I love her so much is because at the top of the play, I would bet you so much money that what she wants is to prove that she's going to be a good Queen of France, like that she's like, I'm going to live up to this crown that I will be inheriting, and at the end of the play, when she becomes the Queen of France, she's like, I would do anything for this not to have happened, and as someone whose father has like gotten really close to that, I get it. You know what I mean? Like I get that sense of like, I unwish all of the achieving goals I ever had. I unwish every ambition I ever had if it could mean that this would not have happened. And I think of like that final scene, which is more like a movement, you know, like 5-2. And I just don't see her instinct to mock the boys mercilessly multiple times as coming from a motivation of like sowing peace and harmony between the 8 of them. To me, it's like, I think she's almost performing for her ladies, and to a certain extent, depending on the show, she might be performing for the audience. That she is cleverer, that she's smarter, that she's got like, that she can make them look foolish. And there's a bit of, I think there's a little streak of malice in there that because she is away from court and she's away from her father and sort of all of that expectation, she gets to kind of, she gets to test, I suppose, like the wingspan of her own like wit and kind of superiority in a way that she hasn't before. And that to me feels very 3. But and that feels 3 in a non-healthy way. Like that doesn't feel like a 9 going to 3 in growth. So that is like,
this is something I want to just kind of sprinkle in. It is far more likely to see a type in stress than you will see a type sitting at their growth point, right? So I think it's nice to know what the possibilities are, right, at your heart point, at your growth point, because that is available to you as a tool. But you almost have to be in a good place in your own spot first, and then you have the privilege or the liberty to be able to reach out and grab from your growth point, your the 3 in this case for the 9. It is way more likely in this life as humans to be kind of constantly going back and forth between your stress point. So, and I would also probably, I mean, I know these are, excuse me, fictional characters. So you write it, they're super healthy, super evolved, sure. But again, that doesn't make for a good play. You need conflict and stress. So I would probably say that it is more likely to see the opposite of that sort of viewpoint. You see what I'm saying? Like instead of her being a 9 that's in growth, maybe she's a 3 that's going to a 9 in stress. You see what I'm saying? So it's probably more likely the other way around.
I got you.
But Jeremy,
nice try,
No, I definitely think with you, Jeremy, that like the princess has like 9 and 3 are her numbers, right? Like regardless of sort of how you play with the two of them, like I absolutely think that she has behaviors of both, like colors of both in her.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that she's a little bit meaner and a little bit, I think she's just a little bit more of a performer and an achiever.
I just want to take a minute to shout out to Sharon Beale, who played Princess for us several years ago, who was amazing. And I mean, I guess I'd have to say that her performance probably colors my opinion of 9ness, because she's great and nothing bothers her ever.
God, what would that be like? Can you even imagine?
Like, she is transcendent of all things. Anyway, so I have some others.
Okay.
Most of them don't matter. A couple of them do.
If they're 9s, they matter. Their voices matter. That's one thing. Again, 9 always.
Yeah, sure. But I did purposely pick some cartoony, like, invisible characters. Okay, so Angus, in Mac is one of the like. There are a couple 9s probably in that play. He's probably the lead 9. Fenton in Merry Wives of Windsor.
Yep, I had him.
I think maybe. Like, you could do a lot with the fairies in Midsummer, but they sort of all feel like 9s to me. Viola is one of those that we sort of have mentioned before, and she does literally and actually merge in that play into another being, and so I think we've mentioned her maybe as a 5 or a 6 before.
It was a 6. We had the Mescaline siblings.
Yeah.
As 6s.
Yeah. So I just wonder about her.
Okay.
We've mentioned Julia before, but I would just mention her as maybe a 9 here, because of that peacemaking role at the end of that play.
Yeah. Okay.
Vergis is a great character in Much Ado About Nothing.
Yes.
Who is a 9.
I had him too. I love Vergis.
Thaisa, I think, could be a 9 in Pericles. We mentioned her earlier, but I don't remember when.
Like early, I think she was she 2?
It might be but so we could talk about the difference between 2 and 9.
Okay.
But I
mean, Thaisa doesn't have a lot of text, so that's a hard one.
She doesn't have a lot. And it's sort of just a graceful part. Like, it's there. It's it's just heartwarming when it is, and it's heartbreaking when it's not. And so I've got another few here. Prince Edward, the little kid in Richard III, I think, is a 9.
Have him.
His brother is absolutely not a 9.
No.
His brother is like the next psychopath in training, and probably a 5 actually. I bet I could see it as a 5.
Sorry, Kelly.
Anyway, and I should say that my children played Prince Edward and Richard the Duke of York in our. So I don't know. Maybe they're my opinion of their.
I love that.
Yeah. Anyway, I've been Volio. We've mentioned him before too, but I think there's a real chance he could be a 9. Flavius is a great character in Timon of Athens, who I think is a 9 or a 2, and it's really hard to tell the difference in that play because he's in a servant role. But
with a servant, I know.
I think Hermione could be a 9. In Winter's Tale, I think the old shepherd could be a 9 in Winter's Tale.
Sure.
I think the only remaining semi-controversial one, because we've talked about her before, is Miranda in The Tempest, could be a 9.
I have a question mark next to her. I wanted to, we should probably chat about her at some point. Is that your list?
That's it.
Awesome.
Who you got?
All right. Well, I'm gonna do my list, and then we can sort of come back and chat about some of these. So from All's Well That Ends Well, I think now we're totally on board with the Helena as a 9, and it just feels better for me than slotting her into a 6.
Man, and while we're on it, that play's title is nothing if not about like a 9's approach to the world. We'll come back to that. But I also fine, guys.
I also think that Diana from All's Well might be an 8. Might be a 9. Like I think they might be very different kinds of 9s. but I think they might both be. From As You Like It, I also had Corin. Martex and William, I'm willing to concede only because I don't feel like I know either of them as people, so I'm happy to slot them in where they sort of seem to make narrative sense, but I don't have strong feelings. And LeBeau, I have LeBeau. I also have a question mark next to Duke Sr., who I think we've talked about before, but like Duke Sr. finds this like chill zen contentment in the woods, despite the fact that he's been deposed and, you know, like been separated from his daughter and separated from his power and his authority and his all that he knew in life. Like he still finds that he's like at peace with himself. He's at peace with nature. Like I don't know, like he just has a I'll put it this way. He handles what happens to him way better than I could have. And I don't know if that makes him a 9. Or if that just manifests my 8-ness, but like the things that have happened to him in that play, when we finally meet him in Act 2 in the Forest of Arden, I'm like, oh wow, you are handling this quite well. So I think he might be a 9. And I like that. I like having, I would like it if there were at least a few authority figures in Shakespeare that were 9s, because I feel like that were men, because I feel like we don't get that much. Even in literature and theater today, we don't get male authority figures that are 9s. So that could be kind of refreshing, especially if his daughter's an 8, you know, like that's a nice little, unexpected twist, I suppose, in the gender roles. Comedy of Errors, I think Aegean might be a 9. We don't see much of him, but like he seems to have that ethos. From Cymbeline, I have Pisanio. I think Darling Pisanio is a 9, and I think Pisanio is a 9 with a very strong kind of moral compass, right? Like it's not an inert 9 so much. Like when the 9 going to 3. I think we see that with Pisanio. Loves, labors. Literally, I couldn't think of anyone. I'm willing to say the Forester might be a 9 because he accidentally says something offensive to the princess and then spends like his only lines in the play being like, I didn't mean it, I'm sorry. From Measure for Measure, I think Mariana is a 9. I think we talked about her as a potential 6, but I think she's much more 9. From The Merchant of Venice, I had question marks next to this. Old Gobbo, Lancelot's dad.
Yeah, I thought about it too, and I just can't decide. I think I skipped it because I'm not sure. Like there is a character, but it's
yeah,
like, you know.
I know, and I think it's important in that play that if there is a 9, it's a character that comes in for like one scene and says like 2 lines, like that.
No, there are normal people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting reflection on what happens in that story. From Merry Wives, I also had Fenton. From Midsummer, I didn't think I always sort of imagined the fairies as 7s only because that's how I typically see them played. But I'm willing to say that like Titania's fairies, like her 4, very happy to see, concede they might be 9s. I also had Snug because he's a team player.
Yeah, I actually wrote down like all the mechanicals, and I don't mean all of them because I don't think Peter Quinson, but I mean like Starveling and Snout and Snug have a dissolvability. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
sure.
Like a yielding that they do, all of them in different ways. Yeah.
I had Verges from Much Ado. I'm so excited that you did too. I love that part. I also had the Sexton from Much Ado. And I think the only reason the wheels don't come off the wagon of that play at the 11th hour is because Verges and Sexton are they work together. In Pericles, I didn't have Thaisa, but I think maybe it could be. I had Gower. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned Gower before when I think we were talking about, was it 5s? Because you mentioned like Gower and the chorus from Henry V or something. But a Gower might be a 9. From Taming of the Shrew, I think Baptista Manola might be a 9.
Gets
and he just has no
all
idea.
Over the place. Yeah,
totally. Because I think that Bianca has a lot of her own fire, so he just has 2 daughters that he was just never ever going to be able to control. From the Tempest, I have Miranda with question marks. From Troilus and Cressida, I have Troilus actually as a 9. he is a wet rag by the end of that. I mean, for most of the play, but especially by the end of the play. Like, if Troilus was an 8, that play could have ended in like a murder-suicide. And instead, the play ends with like the longest soliloquy ever, as he just talks about how hard his life is and how sad he is, and like, it's just really pathetic. I think Troilus is a 9, and I think that the problem is that like, when Cressida, like the idealized version of Troilus that Cressida has in her head is like the 9 going to 3, and what Troilus actually is a 9 going to a really unstable 6. So I also had from that play, she doesn't have much text, but Andromache, doing what little she can to keep her husband safe and keep things peaceful. From Twelfth Night, we should talk about Vi. I don't know how I feel about her as a 9. I had the sea captain and possibly Sir Andrew Aguecheek, who we've also talked about before. I could see Sir Andrew as maybe a 9. From Two Gents, I had a question mark next to Julia. I know I mentioned her before, but I think there's definitely some 9-ness. I also think Speed from that play. I think Speed from Two Gents is a 9. From The Winter's Tale, I have Hermione and Perdita. I think it's a mother-daughter thing in that play. I think that's one of the reasons the ending is so luminous. And also, Kelly had mentioned like escapism or like withdrawing. Like Hermione literally just like withdraws from the play. Like we hear that she's dead and then we don't see her for 2.5 acts. But also with Perdita, like Perdita just like leaves Bohemia, right? Like when things go south, she and Flores are like, Kate, bye. And then, and of course we don't lose sight of them. We travel with them back to Sicilia, but it's the same thing. I feel like mother and daughter have the same thing where they're like, shit hits the fan and they're like, okay, we're tapping out.
If you enjoy the work of Sweet Tea Shakespeare, you can find us all over the socials. We're on Facebook. We have a special secret Facebook community group that we'd love for you to join. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, you name it, we're on it. So join us, click in, give us a like, leave us a review, and we look forward to connecting with you in all of those places. If you'd like to contact us, please email ours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS @sweetteashakespeare.com.
From the Henriade, I think I had John of Gaunt with a question mark, and I really like that reading of it, Jeremy. It's obviously, I think it's hard for me because I know the historical context of those plays so well from my research. It's hard for me to sometimes disentangle who they really were from who they're presented as. And it's a good reminder that like he isn't the John of Gaunt that he was historically in that play. He's filling a very specific role in Richard II. I also had the Queen and Bagot from Richard II. And then from Henry IV, Part 1, maybe this is controversial, but I think the Earl of Worcester might be a 9. Like a 9 that can be like malicious and schemy, but like a 9. Because the Earl of Worcester's motivation seems to be to like restore peace to the kingdom that has been led astray by Bolingbroke, and Worcester has this really like even keel personality where like he's always like he's one of the few that can get through to Hotspur, and he flares up with anger at Bolingbroke, but that to me we don't see that angry, that like fire angry Worcester anywhere else in the play. It's only in that scene with Bolingbroke, which for me is like the inverse John of Gaunt, where John of Gaunt is pretty even keel and then lashes out at Richard right before he dies, so that anger comes at the end. I feel like with Worcester, it's opposite. We see the flash of anger first, and we're like, oh, you're a hothead like Hotspur. And then we go outside the throne and we realize, oh, no, that was just in there. That was with that one person that he hates. And for the rest of the play, he's actually this like, I don't know. I think he's a 9. I also had Mortimer from Henry IV Part 1. He's only in one scene, but he basically plays the Peacemaker the whole time. From Henry IV Part 2, Prince Thomas, which is hilarious that Shakespeare decided to make Thomas and Hal the closest brothers because in real life they hated each other. But yeah, Prince Thomas, he also makes him the youngest to sort of strengthen that. The Lord Chief Justice, I think from Henry IV Part 2. If he's not a 9, I don't really know where a 9 is. And then from Henry V, I have the Governor of Harfleur and Queen Isabel at the end. From the Wars of the Roses, Henry VI. I feel like we got to talk about Henry VI. He literally was called the Peacemaker. And he's in stress both of those plays because he presents as a 6 for most of those plays. 6'6", but like he's in major stress, so it makes sense that those would be his like preferred behaviors. But he literally has monologues, whole monologues where he's like, set this aside, friends, like forgive each other, like let's move forward, like England is never going to thrive if there's like factionalism and like hatred bred between you. Like, please, like set aside your differences and love each other. Yeah, I think he's a 9, and bless him. And then also from that play, not from that play, but from that series, possibly Brackenbury from Richard III, and then I had Prince Edward from Richard III. From King John, I think Prince Arthur is a 9, and I think that's where so much of the tragedy comes from. Is you see Prince Arthur and you see the kind of young man he is, young boy man, 13, 14, whatever, however old he is, and you're like, wow, you actually would make a great king, right? And it's not because you have some like crazy chivalry or like some deep ambition. It's because he's kind and wise and thoughtful, and like how much better off would England have been if he had made it to adulthood. From Henry VIII, I have Capucius, the Spanish ambassador that's so loyal to Queen Catherine. From Antony and Cleopatra, I'm willing to concede the clown. I never thought about it, but I don't know where else I would put the clown, so that's fair. I had the messenger that has to come and bring news about Antony getting married. Poor
he gets
guy.
beaten up. Yeah, he's a poor guy.
That scene. From Coriolanus, I have Virgilia, Coriolanus' wife, and also the first citizen, because of the rebelling citizens, the first citizen is the one who's actually willing to like listen to Menenius and like explain the people's grievances like calmly and dispassionately and like really try to sow harmony. The other citizens are like, we'll kill you. So yeah. From Hamlet, darling Horatio. And I think he's the subtype that's like the intimate one, where it's just like he's just like he's like projecting or like grafting onto Hamlet, and literally would follow the disaster Prince of Denmark to the ends of the earth. And I think he's possibly the most quintessential 9. If we think about each of the types having like an archetypal Shakespeare character, I think it's Horatio. From Julius Caesar, I had Cid the Poet in an earlier category, willing to concede he might be a 9. I had Artemidorus and Varro from the end. Artemidorus is kind of from the beginning and Varro is kind of from the end. Again, interesting to me, as with the sort of like track I had earlier with Portia, Artemidorus and Varro could be played by the same actor, and I think that's interesting. From King Lear, the first servant, Cornwall's servant, who has that amazing speech and then dies. I've never spoken up, but I have to now because morality demands it.
I got to kill that person once. It was fun on stage.
Well, good for you. You were Cornwall.
I was.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm curious. It doesn't matter so much with, I guess, with a company like Sweet Tea where you're kind of using company members, but like, what was the age difference between the Cornwall and Regan? Like, what was the dynamic there?
Well, Regan was played by Kaylee Morrison. She's probably like 6 or 8 years younger than I am. That's my guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the servant was played by Jen Palm, if my memory is correct.
Who was also Cordelia, right?
Yeah.
That's a good double. That's a nice double.
We're professionals.
From Mackers, well, I've always wanted to play Cordelia, but only if I can double it with the Fool. From Mackers, I have Angus. I also have possibly Lennox, although Lennox seems a little bit more Machiavellian than Angus.
You know what I'm thinking? It wasn't Jen Palm. It was Jessica Osno. Yeah, anyway. But the reason I thought it was Jen Palm is because she was our fight director. So I did kill her a bunch too. Do you know what I mean?
We love you,
but
Jen.
For different reasons.
I wonder if Lennox goes the same way as the Earl of Worcester, like a Machiavellian 9. From Othello, I think the Duke of Venice at the beginning is a 9. From Romeo and Juliet, I have Benvolio. I also have Lady Capulet. is a really like
I
maladjusted
think
9.
I agree because she doesn't go anywhere else, but I also don't think she's a character. Sorry, nines. You're wet noodles sometimes. I'm sorry.
Wallflowers. A little bit better.
Yeah. And then I actually like Flavius from Timon of Athens as a 9. I was thinking about his text because I have him on my list. I was thinking about his text, and I prefer him as a 9, even though I bet you could play him either way, because I think there is something really kind of a bit icky about assuming that someone is a 2 in Shakespeare, or making them a 2 just because they serve someone else and they're like socioeconomically disenfranchised. That like makes them like more prone to service. I like him as a 9. Titus, I have no one, and I think that's pretty intentional that there are no 9s to be found in Titus Andronicus.
I think the only one that struck me, and we've already mentioned him, is Marcus. I think there's a chance that could work.
Yeah. So that's my list. The only one that I feel like we should definitely circle back to is, or maybe 2, Viola and Miranda. Those are the 2 that I like. I don't know. I don't know how I feel.
Yeah, I could go many ways on Viola. I do think there's a lot of anxiety like in that character, built into that character, but also is put into a lot of anxiety-inducing instances. Right. So I don't know that it drives her. It's just like where we see her most of the time. So that's learning valid. About the difference between 9 and 6 might be helpful here.
Well, we did. We already did.
Oh,
she explained it to us. And I think that Vi actually, like, I'm willing to think of her more as a 9 than a 6, because I agree with you, Jeremy, that she's just put into like ridiculously stressful situations. And but like, think of her on the beach. She finds out her beloved twin brother, like the yin to her yang, has died in traumatic circumstances. She has her own trauma from it. It was a shipwreck that happened like 5 minutes ago. And once she sort of establishes, where am I? What's going on? She immediately is like, all right, what steps do I need to take? What do I need to do? Like she has this ability to be, to achieve. She has this ability to like find, why are you looking at me like that?
You just said steps and it made me think of other numbers. Like that's a planner, not a person moving out of lethargy. You know what I mean?
That's true. No, that's true. But I also think like of late in the play when Orsino, fucking Orsino, he's like, oh, Olivia, you have fallen in love with my page. Well, guess what? I'm going to kill my page. And she's like, great. And I'll just go with you because to make you happy, to do whatever makes you happy, I would die 1,000 times, which is, it's a very tricky moment. But the fact that she says it so like freely and willingly, and she's just like, okay, fine. Let's do it. Like, to me, that is there's a level of like, she's like at peace with herself and she's at peace with her love for him. And it sounds really morbid. It's almost an optimism that I don't think you would get if she was a 6. I still think Sebastian is a 6 because he handles what happens to the two of them so much worse than she does. He's so much more ill-equipped to handle his grief and trauma than she is. And he delays, like he I don't know.
Well, and I would say for in Viola's case as a 9. I mean, most of that play she spends from a structural perspective as a peacemaker. She is there to sort of impart this person's message to this person and make this relationship sort of work, and she's good at it. She's so good at it that she not only merges into some of that, but like people see her, like value her for that disposition or skill or whatever you would call it. You know what I mean?
She's a broker. Yeah. She's the broker version. Yeah. Because even when it gets so tense and heated with Orsino, and she's like, stop thinking that just because you're a man you have the capacity to feel more and be in love more. Like, that's not how anything works. Even after she has that moment with him, the next thing she says is she's like, okay, do you want me to go back to her now? Which is like just unfathomable to me. But of course, she's a great character. So yeah, maybe Vi is a 9 and Sebastian is a 6. I can see that. And I guess it would make sense why.
Go ahead, you first.
Oh, well, it would make sense why they can like commune like they do, because she gets 6. You know what I mean? Like she understands it, not just because of Sebastian, but because that's where she goes to in stress. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that she like, that is probably part of why they are so in sync.
And well, where my brain's going right now is it's to this other play with a shipwreck in it, and it would be the third play with a shipwreck in it, with 9s in the end. So Winter's Tale, like the presence of Hermione and Perdita at the end is supposed to be restorative and peacemaking and forgiving. And actually the same thing is true about Julia's role at the end of Two Gents. And the same thing would be true about Viola. And then I think the same thing is true about Miranda. And part of the reason I see Miranda as a 9 is because she is so self-effacing, but it doesn't come necessarily from a she doesn't hate herself. It's not that. It's like I'm really willing to put you first, and it's coming from a place of generosity, and she does it. I think with her father in those opening in that opening scene, not the opening scene, but the second scene, where she's really being inquisitive and really wants to know his perspective and really wants to know this story, and she does it with Caliban. Even though he's given her reason not to, she sees him with a gracious eye. And then when Ferdinand comes in, I mean, she it's not like she's insecure, but she is willing to sort of like put him first, and she even speaks down to herself. It's sort of like I can't remember some of the phrases, but she's like, like I realize I'm my own inadequacies in this thing that's going on here. That doesn't bother me. I think you're sort of this wonderful looking, person, and that, so she's got some language about that. And in the log carrying scene, she's like, no, sit down. I'm going to take care of this for a while. And it doesn't come from like a two space. It really comes from like a, no, I want to do what you're doing. I want to hang out. I want to have something in common with you. And so anyway.
Yeah, so I would agree with that.
You guys have come back to 2 and 9 a couple of times. So let's point a couple of things out there. First of all, the 2's in the heart center and the 9's in the body center. So, but not the problem, but I think the confusion comes in because the 9's are very heartfelt people, right? They kind of present a bit more, they're more emotionally, like their emotions are a bit more apparent than maybe some other body types. So just, again, their body repressed, right? So they're not going to look like the other body types as aggressive and assertive and all of that. They are people oriented and are super relational. Again, that's a way in which they keep their calm because the people around them, are kind of a force of stability and balance. The questions around 2 and 9 are of being liked. So if you were to ask a person between those two numbers, what do you think is more important? Or if you're doing things, you're being generous, you're being benevolent, are you doing it because you're concerned about being liked or not, right? So the 2 kind of has that underlying sort of thought, motivation, so to speak. The 9 doesn't really think that much about it.
Sure.
Questions around friends, like if you were to ask a 9, tell me about your friends. A 2 would be able to kind of just rattle off, who they are, why they're important, what they want, what their needs are. They kind of know everything about their friends. And a 9 probably hasn't given a lot of thought to it. Friends are important to them, but it's not like a focus, right? Like the other people and who they are, what they need. It's just nice to have, right? It's comfortable. And then the other question is of knowing what others want and need. So when you are able to provide something that someone else wants. A 2 can do it intuitively. They just know, and they are able to kind of show up with that thing, right, that makes the other person happy. And a 9 is not as good at it. Like the desire to do nice things is there, but they actually have to like ask people, hey, what do you want? Right? They don't have that knowing that a 2 would have. And back to the subtype, that sexual or one-to-one fusion type looks very familiar to a 2. But the reason why someone is fusing or merging as a 9 with another person, it's not so much to kind of have that relationship. It's more about the closer they are to someone else, the more they can push down and not pay attention to their own internal sort of ecosystem. Like they're able to forget themselves even more fully when they're merging with someone else. So it's kind of like it's a sloth. It's a laziness of getting to know oneself, because that seems turbulent. So they just like, well, I'm just going to merge over here with this person. So.
I don't like the unhealthy
look a lot
parts
alike.
of what you're saying for Miranda, because I don't think she's particularly unhealthy. But I do think she's new. Do you know what I mean? To the entire world, and so there might be some reason. Like we find her basically just waking up to sort of what the whole world is like. So I wonder if she gets past there because of that, or like the sinister stuff hasn't been built in fully yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we made it through the 9s.
We made it through the 9s, and to celebrate, to sort of congratulate ourselves, we're taking a victory lap, actually.
Oh, I like that.
We're very, well, I'm excited to announce. I don't know how Jeremy's feeling. I'm going to speak for both of us, Jeremy. We're excited to announce that on Friday at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, Kellie and Jeremy and I are going to be reconvening. Kellie is going to do a brief rundown of all of the types, and just refresh our memories of everything we've learned over the course of this series. And Jeremy and I are going to type the Shakespeare plays themselves. And we are going to go through the complete works, and we are going to do our best to type each play, which should be super fun.
Jeremy looks nervous. It's gonna be amazing.
Can you try to be excited, Jeremy?
I am a little excited, but mostly I'm afraid.
Why?
It's it's like 39 opportunities to be wrong.
Okay, what we're doing is I think unprecedented. I don't think that no one's going to be able to prove that you're wrong, because I don't know that this has ever been done before.
You're right. I mean,
I don't know.
We've
I don't
already
know
typed
what
one.
the
All's well that ends
final
well is a
word
9.
would be.
Moving on. So we only have 38 left.
It's going to be fun. For everyone who's listened, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really, really fun for the three of us. We've, even though that may not be immediately apparent for sometimes for Jeremy and I, we've actually really enjoyed this. And I mean, I am going to speak for you again, Jeremy. Like, Kellie, we are so grateful to you for all of the research and ingenuity that you brought. We could never have done this without you. So thank you so, so much.
Thanks.
Never do a podcast without a 5.
That's true.
That's really
true. Know who your people are and what you need for what. And yes, that is very true.
All right, friends. We'll see you soon.
We'll see you on Friday.
TTFN.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Our podcast was produced by Claire Martin and Jeremy Fiebig. Ashanti Bennett is our general manager. Our theme song was written by Owen Eddy. This podcast was made possible by our friends at the Arts Council of Fayetteville and Cumberland County and our fabulous monthly sustainers at patreon.com/sweetteashakes. You can join us there for an exclusive weekly podcast and loads of other fun perks. If you've enjoyed your time with us today, subscribe to this podcast or leave us a review on whatever platform you get your podcasts from. If you want to hang out with us in a future episode, drop us a line at hours@sweetteashakespeare.com. That's HOURS@sweetteashakespeare.com. Thanks again for listening to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. Until next time, you that way, we this way.